Welcome to the Untitled Voice Chat for the week of April 14th, 2016.
My nickname is Otero. My nickname is Brian.
My nickname is Pear.
Oh, that voice!
And you're listening to IGN's Nintendo Show. I don't know why we tried to do that, but Pear, why that voice?
What's wrong with you?
Because
Well, it had to be accurate, right? They don't have like a Schwarzenegger-esque.
That doesn't
accent.
Is
sound
that
like-
what you think you sound like?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
You know who that sounds like?
What?
No human being in the history of the world. That sounds like nobody ever.
I sound like that.
Well, thank you for joining us for another fun-filled. Can you just answer questions like that the rest of the show?
I will happily. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. This is IGN's Nintendo Show. Just so you get used to our actual voices, I'm Jose Otero. That's Brian Altano.
What's up?
And this is
My nickname. Hello.
My nickname is Pear.
I'm here.
All right, so let's kick things off. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today. First of all, the Animal Crossing series celebrates its 15th anniversary. This just happened this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the series as a whole. Secondly, you should do that for everything. Secondly, we're going to talk about Star Fox Guard and what we've played of it and what we can talk about. Is Miitomo fading too fast on the App Store and Google Play? Big question on our minds. And then we're going to follow it up with the question block. We got a fun show, but let's kick it off with the Animal Crossing series, which now celebrates 15 years. I can't believe it went by so fast.
I can.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
you were there when it started.
So when I played the first game, I had no
Go
kids. I had
Botsu no
no
Mori.
kids. I
Okay.
had no kids. I played the N60, the Japanese N64 release, the import, on cartridge.
Animal Forest.
And it was called Animal Forest,
Yeah.
Dobutsu no Mori.
Yep.
And I loved it when it came out. It's like it was hard to when they first showed it, I'm like, is this gonna be fun? All you do is run around, and it's not even like an RPG where you get like the kick-ass sword or some new magic power. It's like you give somebody a letter. Or,
Yeah.
like somebody forgot the Game Boy. Or,
kind of like
know.
answering a question on an app that just
Yeah,
recently
exactly.
came out. Okay.
Yeah.
It's very non-traditional.
It's very fascinating because, we'll talk about Miitomo later in the show, but I think what we'll get into with that is that Miitomo is sort of struggling to find that hook that keeps you going. But Animal Crossing was always a proof that it didn't need to be so much of a big hook. Like sometimes it's as small as getting a lamp for your apartment, and Miitomo does it to an extent where there's like you can get a shirt every day, you can go and buy different clothes. Animal Crossing had just enough new stuff every day or every hour that it just kept you. The carrot was just small enough to keep you going.
Then the changing seasons obviously mattered. The holiday kind of check-in and certain insects or fish at certain hours, right? Like they had some clever stuff around the real-time clock that Miitomo doesn't really have yet,
Yeah,
right?
they focused on collections and building collections, and there is
that
an
was the other
aspect
thing.
of that is it just appeals to that OCD side of your brain that must have everything. I feel like for some folks, like trophy culture and achievement culture has very much become those things. Not to say that they were inspired by Animal Crossing, but just to say that it's kind of appeals to that mentality.
Yeah.
So my question for you guys then, obviously we've been talking a little bit about what makes this series so special, and in fact, just how many different kinds of people play Animal Crossing to me always strikes me as like, oh my God. But my question to kick things off is, what was your first interaction with the series? So, Pear, you told yours.
Yeah.
You imported it. This was strictly through work. Did you know anything before going into it?
I'd seen it at I think it was at Space World in Japan. I'd seen the game before, and it was a surprise reveal, and it just looked really charming, right? Like the graphics, it has that kind of Wind Waker-esque like timeless style, where it's like you don't look at it and go like, oh my God, these are the best graphics ever, but it's like so cartoonish and yet so appealing, like the little triangles in the textures and the almost Link to the Past like trees, all that kind
I
of
want
stuff.
to ask you this though. I feel like whenever Nintendo throws a curveball, I always notice, at least maybe in this office or maybe in the social circles I dabble in, there is a split between people willing to give it a chance and people going, well, this is stupid. I don't want this. I want Mario 64 too.
Right.
What was the reaction then from the press side?
Well, these were the
mind?
days of the kinder, gentler internet.
Was there a day?
Yeah,
Were there
no,
days?
for sure. I think. I think things have definitely gotten a little bit worse and a little bit more kind of like, no, this is not the kind of company I want. I think back in the N64 days, there was just this excitement about all these kind of games in 3D, you know, where like you didn't know what to make of this game, but you knew Harvest Moon, and so you're like, oh, is this Nintendo's Harvest Moon? And everybody had the trust that Nintendo would be able to take a concept like a peaceful game like that and make it big. But
the cynicism and hatred for N64 stuff back then was reserved mostly for 2D games.
Yeah,
for some
that's
weird
true.
reason.
And like there was what was Yuki Mischief Makers,
Yeah,
right? Like
one
games
of the
like
only
that where
2D
people
games,
like, oh, Treasure, don't make a game with a robot made. I want to blow stuff up in a big way, right? Like people wanted certain companies to go in a certain direction. That certainly happened, and like Yoshi's Story got vitriol because it was too easy, right? Like that kind of
Right.
stuff definitely happened. But Animal Crossing, nobody knew what to do. And then when Nintendo first talked about it, to do with it, but when Nintendo first talked about it, they said this is a communication game. And then people are like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound like too much fun, right? But you also started dreaming. It's like, oh, is this an online game where you will send messages to people? And, you know, like, I think people thought there was some other hook to it when in fact it was about the simplicity of that game.
Right.
And that it actually worked is pretty amazing to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Brian.
it was a very fascinating thing. I think you guys are very right in that it was like it was new and it was kind of hard to quantify.
Yeah.
And it didn't really fit into any of the boxes they'd pre-established. I think Animal Crossing was always fantastic because it tread that line between sort of that obsessive collector, as you pointed out, but also that kind of flourishing artist creative type, where it's a mesh between finding things and ticking off boxes, and then taking a few hours to just make something yourself, like creating textures and flags in that game and patterns for your shirts and stuff like that was incredible. Like that,
Yeah.
the ability to do that. Even doing stuff like connecting the Game Boy Advance and going to that island. I actually used the Game Boy Advance for all of my pixel art creations in that game because it was just closer and you could move the D-pad a little easier than the joystick. I got the first Animal Crossing game that ever came to America, the one for GameCube, when I was in college. And that was kind of the perfect game for college because I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford a ton of games. But buying something that I could check in on regularly that would also last me like a year or maybe more was great for me.
But what made you take a chance on it? I'm just curious when I think of you, and this is not to typecast you,
Sure.
but I do think of you. First of all, you're a very funny person, like to be around. You're very witty, very artistic. So I can see the game appealing to your artistic side. But I just wonder what got you into it. Like you're also hardcore Jersey, East Coast.
Totally. Yeah.
You know, I like my big pun in rap, which was pretty much prominent in that time.
And I was playing this game in New York City, which is fun, like in a New York winter where it's cold and Wu-Tang outside and all that.
Exactly. So like, how did they get your attention?
I think it was the fact that it was so Nintendo actually caught me at a really good time with the GameCube. I had just moved to New York and I was kind of ready to not really give up on games, but kind of put them in the back pocket. And I got this invite to this GameCube launch event. And I went in and got to play Smash Brothers and Rogue Squadron and Pikmin and all this other stuff. And it sold me on the system. And once I got the system, I started really paying attention to what they were doing. And I loved the idea of them bringing over stuff from Japan. I remember specifically growing up reading IGN and reading people's previews that you guys were doing on what was that weird photo dance studio game for
Talent
the N64?
Studio.
Talent Studio.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing that.
Mario Artist.
Yeah, I remember seeing that and being like, this doesn't really fit into the mascot platformer or adventure game box that Nintendo's so good at doing. What is this thing?
Yeah.
So I started looking at it and started realizing that you get your own house in it, you get your own apartment. And I was looking around my apartment at the time, and I'm like, half of the chairs in my apartment are milk crates.
Yeah.
You know, like the set decorations are 40 bottles. Like the lamp over there is actually a hookah. Like there's really not a lot going on in here.
Yeah.
And I was like, video games are escapism, and if you can escape into a house that's bigger than yours. On a very small fundamental level, then that's something huge too. That's really cool. So I started playing it more and more, and then I realized you can actually go Jersey in this game. You can go New York. You can start teaching slang to the animals. You can start.
Omar's coming. and
Yeah,
stuff
I
like
started.
that.
I
You can
started
teach them
making.
that.
Omar coming.
I started making rap album covers as the pixel art and raising them up as flags and signs. So like
This month, Nas.
Yeah, well, seriously, Nas's first album, Illmatic, I recreated that perfectly with pixel art. So people would come to
so
my
good.
town, and that was the other thing. I was in a long distance relationship at a time with a girl I started dating in high school, and then she went to college. I went to college. She went in Rhode Island, and I went in New York. She got a GameCube also, and we would play Animal Crossing. And when we would see each other, we would take each other's memory cards and plug them into each other's GameCubes and
That's what you
exchange
call it.
letters. Yeah, and then weird things would happen. Like my character would show up in her town, and he'd have letters, and he'd be showing my ex or my girlfriend
Nice.
letters that I had,
Yeah.
and I'd see stuff from her. Eventually, we broke up, and then it got weird because my animals would be like, "Hey, Kristen has something cool to say." I'm like, "I'm not talking to her. You tell her I have nothing to say." Listen, you walrus. I don't want to talk to that woman anymore.
Okay.
But it was something cool that kind of like connected me with my girlfriend at the time. It connected me with my roommate because he had a house in the town, and we would exchange items and trade and stuff like that. And one of my favorite things I ever did was I went to the school library. And I went on GameFAQs, and I printed. Somebody had made an Animal Crossing guide of all the furniture guide, and I sent it to the printer because I didn't have a printer, and it was something like 3,000 pages.
Oh, God.
So the
You could
printer
print that in a college.
yeah,
and
the
nobody
printer
will
just
stop
shot
you.
out a book, and I just walked home in the rain with this huge stack of papers and ran back to my apartment with a pen and started checking off. All right, that's modern furniture set number one. A lovely couch, green chair. all that
lovely
stuff.
couch. That's
You
right.
hit upon a good point, though, in that there's also the unexpectedness of the day and the surprises that come with
Yeah.
playing through an Animal Crossing game. And there was that challenge to the notion, is this a video game? I sincerely remember this being one of my first brushes with that conversation.
Really?
Right.
Yeah, I
right.
religiously read EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, back then, and I know that they had some coverage on it. I think I had seen an ad in the magazine and maybe an ad on television, but something said to me, give this a chance, and I had a GameCube, so I was like, I'm going to try this out. And I have to admit, on this podcast, I didn't get it. I tried it. I was like, that's nice. I don't quite understand what this is about, and this doesn't seem really aimed for me. I
Well, you
appreciate
don't like
what's
people,
happening
so
here.
like
It makes a lot of
yeah.
sense. So I just let it all sort of go. But regardless, I think that as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate it.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that debate, by the way, is that I still don't know if it's a video game or not. I mean, I guess it is in the traditional sense or even the modern sense, but it did have video games in it. Like my house had every NES game, and it took me a very long time to get those. But I think that was another reason why it was that was like one of the things that
There
kept
was a
me hooked,
hook,
right? Yeah.
There was a great hook, and
yeah.
I mean, the debate. I sometimes get the debate over whether Miitomo is a video game. It's got the pachinko drop thing in it, but really at its core, it's just about messaging and answering questions, right? It's like a survey app almost. But like I always thought, Animal Crossing, it was just the gameplay was there. It was all about collecting and the interactions with these characters, figuring out why there's a drunk sailor on the beach, right? Like it had these kind of like mini mysteries built into it. So I never understood the challenge that this is not enough
But it
game
also
for me.
was sort of like a job. It was kind of like
yeah.
driving your forklift in Shenmue,
Sure.
except it's the whole game.
Some
you know?
chores, yeah.
There were chores to be
like the
done, but you
forklift.
didn't. Oh, I liked it too. But thinking back on it, sometimes I wonder if me today would like it as much as I think.
I think what was cool about it was like the forklift stuff in Shenmue was sort of like a lull in not an admittedly fast video game, but in a game that had
I should buy one.
had peaks and valleys, right? Animal Crossing was pretty much like this is the note.
Yeah.
This is the beat, this is the BPM, this is the rhythm. If you're into it, it's here for a while.
And that game basically said, get out once in a while.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you don't have enough money to do anything. Like in the beginning, remember?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Yeah.
Like the game
You're in
basically
debt.
said, yeah, come back tomorrow.
I mean, I
actually thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I told this story when Bill Trennan was on, but there was a whole part. I mean, when you're in college, you stay up till weird hours in the night. I remember just like I had 5 people in my town. I would just go knock on their doors all night long, like, "Yo, Betty, wake up! Betty, wake up! You got any furniture?" And this hippo would wake up and be like, "Why do you keep knocking on my door? I don't have anything." And I was like, "All right, there's nothing left for me to do right now. I can go fishing." But eventually, you catch all the fish, you fill your house with them, you wake up, you sell them to Tom Nook. But Nook's asleep, everyone's asleep, but you're still up running around the town like a crazy person.
All the other animals are mad, going.
the piano.
I
love that.
Yeah. I did want to say though that I guess that's the other piece then, that the game responds to you regardless of how you try to interact with it, and everyone has something to say. Like I laugh all the time when someone says, I think Callie said this in the office, that in the more recent traditional one, not Wild World, the one on 3DS. I'm sorry, Animal Crossing New Leaf.
Yeah.
If you want someone to move because they put their house in the middle of your brick road, keep beating them on the head with the net, and they'll eventually get the picture.
Is that real?
I've heard people say that. I don't think it's real.
Because I did that to
I think it's urban
lion,
myth.
lion Aziz back in the day.
I gotta try that
I
with,
wanted him out of my town.
I mean,
think of some
I
places
wish
trying
there
to-
was
garbage in his front lawn.
the
Try hitting
game
Marty with a net every morning. See if he'll move his desk. Go ahead.
outside the pit. The game does encourage mostly good behavior, and I wish it did have a little bit more of a mean streak too, just to kind of, kids will be kids, and like. They want to build sand castles, but they also want to tear them down. Like I feel like you need to cater to that part of human nature as well. So to make somebody move by hitting them on the head, that's Jersey style, right?
Oh yeah.
That's how you do it. All right, cool. So then let us move forward then to Star Fox. Star Fox Guard, more specifically, which we have been playing. We've had Star Fox.
Played
We've
the
had
other one, too.
Both for some time. We talked about Star Fox Zero last week. We had a really short episode.
Yeah.
But Guard is sort of a different beast, born from a game that we saw as a prototype 2 years ago or whatnot. And what do we think?
Well, I mean, first of all, when you buy Star Fox, you get the game included, right?
For
now.
retail, yeah. Or you could buy it separately as a download if you're not interested in Zero, but if you buy them together, you're given a discount for that.
And so I kind of ignored it in the beginning. I'm like, screw that. I've got the real Star Fox. I'm going to play this game, having a ton of fun with it, especially the co-op mode. And so I ignored it, and then I booted it up because I kind of felt like, it's kind of the free pack-in. But I'm actually surprised as it has some depth to it. It has some really clever concepts. It's well presented. It's not a $50 or $60 game for sure, right? But like, I'm surprised they've felt the need to pack this in with Star Fox, with Star Fox Zero.
To me, that almost begs the question: was there shaky confidence at Nintendo in a retail package only for Star Fox Zero, based on the content that it had? Because Star Fox games, by their design, by history, are short games.
Well, shooters in general,
shooters
right?
that
Like,
are meant to. Well, yeah, but this shorter to an extent that it's a game that encourages multiple playthroughs and multiple replayability. You're going through to get medals and high scores and co-op runs and things like that. But
Which is at odds probably with games that most kids play nowadays, right? Like they look for the deep kind of multi-week experience.
You buy Minecraft, you're trapped for thousands of hours by that game. Not trapped, but you can give up 1,000 hours to a game like that. So and we've talked about this on the show before, just the weird place that pricing and value get kind of, sort of the argument and the conflation that comes around that argument because of how you want to satisfy people. But it's not a throwaway experience. Like Guard is very deep. There's a lot going on in terms of, there's a ton of charm, which is very signature of Nintendo products. But there are two classes of robot. There are a combat class and there are a chaos class. Chaos class are mostly designed to disorient your cameras. There's one that is shaped like a fan and it'll just blow the camera to look upward, so you're not looking at a certain position. There are 12 screens on screen, and you are cycling between them on the gamepad, and whichever one you are currently focused on shows up in the center. In case you haven't seen this game, there's a big robot chicken that falls in love with your camera and will steal it. That's another chaos robot.
That's one of the weirdest sentences I've ever heard you say.
Yeah. Oh, there's more. There's one that it's shaped like a television. It has a propeller on its head and two arms, and it'll fly up to a camera, and you can catch this happening. It'll look into it and go, basically attach itself, and it's displaying something that isn't happening.
It's like Mission Impossible.
So it's like the Mission Impossible photo.
Yeah.
And the
So
only way
weird.
you know it happened is by looking at the gamepad. You'll see an X on your camera showing, hey, three's not showing you an accurate image. It's like, oh my goodness. Like
It's funny because it plays to that like stress of having to monitor all these monitors.
Right.
And then one of them you got to remember, that one's going to be fake, right? It's very, very clever.
Well, and it is also sort of setting up that language looking between two screens, which is what Star Fox Zero pretty much takes the ball and runs with. This is a game that instead of you flying and shooting at enemies that are also flying around you, you are stationary and the enemies are coming towards the center, and you're trying to cycle through cameras to stop them.
Do you guys think the timing is weird on the release of this game? Like, it seems odd to sort of like.
I feel it's odd that it's a pack-in. Like, I feel like it devalues it almost, right? And I've heard this sentiment echoed in our comments and on YouTube, where people say they're like, "Oh, this is just," they kind of just dismiss this as
because it's a cool product, and it's like I don't know if it would have made sense as a lead in to Star Fox Zero, because I think it would have sort of confused the messaging a little bit to kind of be like, if you put this game out 2 months before Star Fox Zero, like prelude to Star Fox Zero, people would be like, "Oh, well, this is not."
It's sort of your ground zeros to your Metal Gear Solid 5 in a way.
But even that gave you a smaller, sort of more compartmentalized idea of what you were getting from the bigger package.
Yeah,
this is
completely different. Yeah, the skill set is the same, but the way you actually play is very different. That's an excellent.
But it's cool.
Point.
It's a cool package, and I'm happy it exists. I just think the timing's a little odd.
It is. It's almost like this should be part of Nintendo Land 2 or something, right? Like, this is the Star Fox attraction in Nintendo Land 2. And quite frankly, I mean, you could have put other Nintendo franchise like wrappers on it. This could have been a Pikmin defense game where you're defending your fruit from the incoming Bulborbs or whatever, right?
I'm going to go out on a limb. I actually think the Star Fox connection makes a lot of sense simply by virtue of what they're asking of you as a player. The weird thing is having it as a separate disc, I think, is a little odd in that, could this not have been included just on that main one? Like, why sort of make it sort of this package of two things? But at the end of the day, it does at least put in your head value. And we're telling people, like, right now, don't dismiss this game. Like, it is very good.
Right.
It is very good. Like, I've been pleasantly surprised by each planet I play, by the upgrade system in place, by the cameras you get later. You get special cameras that will put things in slow-mo and give you like a saving throw as you're about to lose. You have cameras that will freeze enemies so that you can then swivel another one and shoot it. And it is really fun with a room. It's one of those, we have a Let's Play where Brendan and I played it together, and he's just yelling at me for 9 minutes. He's like, 12! 12! And the thing is, too, you kind of got to develop trust with the other person in the room and make sure that, because there are two different types of robots, and if the combat one makes it to the center, it's game over. You have to hope they understand that. And so I wasn't listening to Brendan for one of them on that Let's Play, and we ended up losing because of it. So I don't know. There's something there, too, that I think is just hilarious in terms of a way to interact with the game, with people. But I think the Star Fox connection, they made it make sense. It's weird because they're two different games, but it makes sense in the context of what it is.
Well, Nintendo has a really good history of doing that. I mean, I think they've even said on Miyamoto said on record before about like coming up with a concept for a game first, and then figuring out which franchise it fits with, rather than just being like, let's make a new Mario game. They're like, we have this water pack. It's really cool. Who gets it?
Yep.
And they're like, Mario gets it. So I think for this game, for them to be like Star Fox gets it, I think it makes sense. Of course, it's strange, and I think they would have found a way to adhere it to any of their franchises. I think, but
you could have been shooting people with bow and arrow in like a Zelda themed one, and it's crystals.
Sure, or make it Splatoon or something.
It's like such a simple concept that works with any of their franchises. It's kind of weird how it is released as a pack-in, but also, maybe this was a decision where they say, this is great for early adopters. If you're buying Star Fox now, you get this whole new game in its own box that you can hold on, and later on you'll just get a single game. Like, who knows, right?
I would
like,
actually love to see.
Well, actually, that's it. They've said the first print run of Star Fox Zero will have both games included, which to me says later Zero is going to be.
So they're trying to do this. Yeah, they're trying to instill a sense of urgency to pick this up, and that's great. I mean, then people who pick it up get an extra reward. We don't know if that first run is going to sell out, of course, or
I would actually love to see a sort of a slightly pared down version of this game on 3DS. That's you. That's your
name. That's my name.
Pared down. A sort of like a slightly simplified version of this game on 3DS.
Does it feel like too much for you?
No, I think it'd be a really awesome portable game. Like I think it feels like the kind of thing you would
see.
Get
it's interesting you say that, because I find it's a game about putting out fires, and I think I'm more comfortable doing that in my living room than I would on the train. I feel bad for the lady sitting next to me.
Pretty stressful.
Oh my, 12, and then like trying to switch between them.
Well, I remember commuting, playing something like Meteos, where you're just like, people are looking at you like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but it's a fun kind of stress. I don't want to say, when I say putting out fires, I mean in the sense that you're just managing all of these tasks, and
they're
if you
fun
do it right,
fires.
you win. I think so. I mean, I think some games can make that stress fun. I think Dark Souls is an extension of the stress of just trying to find secrets, right? And having this beautiful world where you are it is tantalizing what is around the next corner.
Yeah.
I think like the From games do that so well.
Yep.
I think
Spoiler,
this
it's
game
a
is
giant
different.
meat bag monster
Yeah, it's
with
a horse
arms falling
skeleton
off.
with
Who's
human
gonna put a
hands.
spike through you. Okay,
right.
so then
Beautiful.
let's move on then to
Pear.
Mitomo. I'm so glad you said that. So Mitomo,
Dear.
I'm gonna let you finish.
All right.
Mitomo is Mitomo fading too fast on the App Store and Google Play.
Did drop off a lot.
So we saw the first week good performance in Japan. We saw the first week worldwide good performance on the App Store. Apple promoted it, had it as a featured app, which of course helps, right?
Yeah.
The minute you open up your App Store, if you're a customer that's always going there, oh, Nintendo made something, that's cool.
Yep.
But then we've not only seen a steady drop on the charts, but we've also seen that top grossing, it hasn't really cracked a solid spot in the top 150 apps.
There were
in
some
any region.
estimates. Like I saw some estimates, but they're all unsubstantiated.
They are.
made more than 200K a week, which is decent, but it's not setting the world on fire when you have some of the top performing apps doing over $1 billion a year. So I don't know what to think of it at this point. It's like, when people talk about big mobile successes like Angry Birds, it sometimes sounds like an overnight success. It wasn't, right? Like Angry Birds came, went. They updated this app, and Rovio really worked hard until it became this mega hit where everybody then knew Angry Birds. But it took a really long time. Some games will just kind of take off and stay up. Like Candy Crush was a good example of something that went high, but required frequent updates to keep going. And I think this app definitely still needs that there.
Yeah.
Think about, like, let's say it's a social network. When I start my Facebook app, it opens immediately. I get a notification on what's going on. I can share whatever I want, and it's really fast and really easy to get in. Mitomo takes a long time to get started, right? Does the little spinning thing just like Badge Arcade, right? Like, it has stuff to do in the beginning, and so it is not that. It has to be a more deliberate experience and not this kind of quick check to see what's new with my friends.
I think you make a lot of really good points. If you look at something like Minecraft on iOS when it first launched, I mean, it's a shell of what it is now. Like, now it's actually a full-fledged
And a shell of the success, yeah.
Totally. But it's with the iPhone store or the iOS store, or even just apps in general, they are growing ecosystems, and it's a matter of how much Nintendo wants to tap into that. I'm hoping that this is something that they maintain. I think that one of the reasons it's not making a ton of money is because it's really hard to give it money. Like, you have to dig deep to figure out a way to pay it. Actually,
You don't really want that shirt.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I just noticed today they updated, and there's a Famicom controller T-shirt, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like, where was that stuff at launch? Like, they gave you that Mario costume if you traded in My Nintendo coins, but like, if you want to get people like really buying cool stuff or spending money, like, put in more Nintendo stuff. Put in more recognizable stuff. Team up with some brands. Get some cool stuff. Like, have it so it's fun to take those pictures with those outfits, because that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the entire hook of that game.
So day one, they had the Mario outfit. You got a hat for free.
Yeah.
They have this Super Famicom sweatshirt. I think that's a good play. I wonder. I have a couple things to say about Mitomo, but I do agree that there has to be a little bit more to keep you hooked. I do find it funny to look through responses and see what people are saying to things that I've said. I find it difficult to go through the friends list to find or cycle through what my me has to say, because I just added so many people I don't know that I lost the sort of the personal touch, the personal factor to it. But I have a ton of candy, so I'm probably just going to start hitting up Perrin, like bribing him to hear his darkest secrets. But to me, I think that I agree with you. They need more of the Nintendo themed stuff, and I wonder if, when Star Fox comes out, is there a Star Fox line of clothing?
Right,
that
and
shows up.
that's
and
so
then
smart.
You'll buy that.
That's so smart to like
Because
direct
Nintendo,
promotional ties.
Nintendo loves to promote Nintendo within other spaces. They did it with Mario Maker. I half expect a Chicken Walker sprite to show up in Mario Maker leading up to Star Fox Zero's release. I'm probably off. Maybe it's a Landmaster. I don't know, but I expect that. You look at what they did with Smash Brothers, where like adding fighters like Corrin, with a release of a game. And to me, those are all signals that Nintendo is just very conscious of the fact that they can promote their other brands within existing brands.
It's cross promotion.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
It's so smart.
Yeah,
it's so smart.
So I think that the big question for me is that going to happen with Star Fox? I am leaning towards I hope so, because I think that even if Star Fox as a brand is not flying off the shelves in terms of like it worries me because Star Fox Zero and Star Fox Guard is the first time I've looked at comments in a while and just seen sort of a split down the middle of who wants it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And I feel like I haven't seen that in a while. Usually, like with Mario Maker, it was universal, yes. Zelda, universal, yes. With Star Fox, I'm not sure. But regardless, I think that those little tie-ins will just help spread that awareness. Give people the visor, whatever you want to do,
sure.
but do costumes with it. But then the other part of this that I find kind of rubs me in a weird way is Miitomo drop, which is just unlike any Nintendo game I've really played. I even feel like Badge
doesn't it feel like
Center-
we play and
so
like
I feel
it feels like those
Badge
minigame
Center
collections
is more generous in terms of the amount of things or prizes you get. This thing just it feels so much tied to luck.
I just heard I
the
overheard,
ninja outfits went up, and I went for it. You guys went for it, right?
I got it.
worked.
I went for a couple and I missed it 5 times in a row and I was
What
like,
did you
screw
do?
this.
You're like, I'm done.
I
I burned all my
overheard-
tickets on that.
I overheard Eric Sapp, who's one of our lead art designers here at IGN, and he said, I heard him say this in the office a half an hour ago. He said, Miitomo drop is harder than Dark Souls. And I'm like, you know what? That is so true. Like the fact that you have to pay to get in or you save up your tickets, you wait and wait and wait. It's like Willy Wonka. It's like being Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. You get those tickets and, or you save up money for a chocolate bar and you don't get anything. It's tough. So I think that being part of the hook to get you coming back every day, first of all, it doesn't cycle out enough. Like it was those bread costumes for the first 6 days, which is a weird launch
and
choice.
cat stuff.
Yeah,
And cat stuff.
yeah, it felt like it also like that was aimed towards a wider audience, and they're
Yeah.
like ninjas, and all the boys went yes, and just dove in.
But I think
trying to
like,
get their shinobi.
I
on.
think it's like it's a social app that doesn't have a ton to do in it yet, and again, it will as it grows. But you had mentioned, I think, when we first started talking about Miitomo, about how you're going to see people really get involved with this once you start decorating your apartment, and we don't have any of that stuff right now. We just talked about how Animal Crossing hooked us because of very simple reasons like that. I think Miitomo is right within reach of that, and Tomodachi Life got there to an extent. It didn't really let you customize it, but you could pick different themes.
no,
right now,
that was
everyone just
cool.
has a stock place.
Yeah.
And there's no sense of world there of like just people come and go from your place. You tap on them and they scurry out and
But
they come
there
back
is
in.
personality in what people say, and in the
Right, but you
responses
don't have that
get.
like Tomodachi Island type
But I find it very entertaining to see how people respond to
Me
things
too.
and the answers to the questions that they give.
Well, because
And I
it's
think
not
that's a
being
good start.
it's not being censored, and people are using it as this very surreal, like, and that's why I love it. Because people are like, somebody was like,
What do you do to relax?
Yeah, and it's stuff like that. And somebody asked me like, "Who's your favorite male vocalist?" And I was like, "Whoever sang the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series theme song." And that's not the real answer I would give,
Right.
but the real answer is boring.
Right.
So I do that, and that's fun. And I think that like aligning with the right people, like Mike Drucker is one of those people who's just fantastic at Miitomo because he's depressed and surreal and weird, and that's what I look for in social media. When I go on Twitter, if all the tweets I read were like, "My favorite singer is blah blah blah,"
Beyonce.
I'd be like, "Oh God, this is so boring." But I follow comedy writers on Twitter and artists on Twitter and musicians on Twitter because it's interesting. So I think when it's defined by the interesting people who use it and the interesting ways you can use it.
I agree. And then there's one more hook that's that still feels kind of disconnected, and that's of course Nintendo's reward system and the My Nintendo kind of profile system. Like the more I look at Miitomo, I almost feel like it should be the center of your identity. Like it almost should be the me app that connects all the different devices,
you're saying
right?
My Nintendo and Miitomo should be the same app.
Yeah, like to me, like if there's a center point to your identity to Nintendo, Miitomo could actually play that role, and not just being this kind of social app that takes your me and connects it with others, but really being about your experience with Nintendo,
You're so
your
right.
unlocking of prizes, and like when every time you go for a reward, you have to go into Miitomo, you're gonna do other stuff and answer questions. and-
It does feel weird that there's that disconnect. I wish I could access My Nintendo directly through Miitomo and vice versa.
Yeah.
I have noticed cool things through My Nintendo that you can access Miiverse and the eShop, and they incentivize you to do that within those apps.
Yeah.
And I remember I checked Miiverse on my 3DS, and it took a second for the coins to pop up.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
you know, once a week you get 60 coins for checking Miiverse and 30 for each, basically.
Yep.
And you can do that through the website, which works fantastic on mobile. I'm floored at that.
And it's mobile first. You can't really access it. I mean, you can use your Wii U or your 3DS web browser, I guess, to access it, but it's not a dedicated app within Nintendo's core devices. Like, they're very much tapping into you have this device with you.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say on this, because we have to move on, is that I feel like Miitomo is a field test for My Nintendo to me. I feel like the system that they have come up, the missions that they have come up with, are very much a test to see what can we get you to do to go for this platinum currency. And I don't think that's a nefarious angle. I just think it's an interesting one, because then you take those points and what are you spending them on? And are we incentivizing you in a way where we're creating this loop of you playing our product and using that currency to get things either within the app itself or for your other Nintendo devices?
Yeah.
And I think that loop has started in an interesting way. Now, what I question is, will other larger Nintendo games moving forward, Miitomo has its own platinum currency, which has to do, you have platinum coins and platinum Miitomo coins, which I just think is weird. I'm like, wait, so are other games going to get their own currency that jump into the system?
The rewards,
it's unclear.
Achievement system stuff basically could tie into that, right?
Because the ones that are general, like signing into Miiverse, are regular platinum coins, whereas the ones that get 5 hearts a day are Miitomo platinums. So
It's
I wonder
confusing.
how. I don't find it confusing. I just wonder if the system is designed to do that for every entry that's going to approach missions. And also, when do missions start affecting larger Nintendo games on its platforms?
Well,
Miitomo's the only place that's doing it right now.
I have a feeling
outside of those.
I have a feeling the entire like ecosystem of that is going to get screwy if they say if they put out a Zelda game and it's like you get 25 coins for beating a temple or killing a boss without getting hurt. Can I use those coins to buy a Zelda shirt in Miitomo?
Or a Zelda shirt for Zelda.
Right, but that's where it's going to get weird, where it's like there's a currency for each game, but then there's an overall currency. Like, I actually kind of like right now, like I'll play the game for a while. I'll play Miitomo, check in every few days, and then exchange it for like a 3DS theme or that Twilight Princess Picross. It's just a little thing. I don't know if I would have bought that, but I played that game for like 5 hours.
Yeah, me too.
And that was cool.
Yeah.
It was great. It was just
that's a cool way to reward people. No, I completely agree.
And I'm saving up for a WarioWare Touch
We got to
right now.
end on your point because I got to move us forward.
To me, though, that direction makes sense because that's what they have set up for Amiibo or attempted to set up for Amiibo, right? Like something that is like a currency or something that crosses all the different games they do. And so, like, I could imagine them taking this approach to make achievements and these kind of rewards more meaningful. They'd have to level set, like adjust the level of what you get for what coin level, but that seems doable.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So now let's go to the question block. We haven't done this in a while. I asked for questions on Twitter. Thank you so much for everyone who sent them in. We're going to start with Kyle Bean, who asked, do you think we will get an announcement or some sort, direct or otherwise, about NX before E3, or will we go in blind? And the bigger part of that question is, what's your preference? Would you rather go into E3 blind, or do you think they're going to say something beforehand?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen.
Okay.
We won't get anything before, but we won't go in blind because everything Nintendo has been leaking. Okay. So we will get a shard or a sliver of something. I don't know if it'll be real.
That's the worst way to get it. Okay.
It's true. I'm not saying it's ideal. Well, I'd prefer to just find out at E3.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I prefer that too. I do think that they will get. I think they will get something out of the way before E3. I do think there'll be an announcement. It may just be through Japan again and through an interview with Kimishima or in some Japanese business publication where I do think they will go out and say what NX is first. And then they will get everybody interested. They need to get the business world interested, not just consumers. And then E3, they'll show the device.
See, I don't think they do it through a Japanese publication. I think they either make the statement globally themselves or they don't. But I do think Kimishima either says at the next investors meeting, which is around the end of this month, we're talking at E3, or here's a quick thing, and we're not saying more until E3.
Sure.
And that's the big hanging question in the air. Yeah. I also would prefer to go into E3 blind because I feel like for all of us, the unveiling of a console is something that is very special. And the leaky faucets have been a huge problem more than ever. I mean, everything leaks.
I know.
And it's not just them. It's everybody
everybody
right
it's
now.
everybody now.
It's out of control. And I I just like to be surprised, but at the same time, leaks happen, and I understand them, and it is what it is.
Selfishly, I'd love the news tomorrow, but I also, like, less than selfishly, want them to get this right.
Okay.
So I want them to take all the time they can.
Good answer. All right, next question from good friend of the show. What do you think of so there's a rumor running around that Splatoon and Mario Maker may get NX remakes as well as with the Smash 4 one, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. Do you think this means Splatoon 2 is a long way off from happening? I think a Splatoon remake or a Splatoon NX port would make a lot of sense just because of how successful that game was in Japan and in attracting a big audience to it. I just wonder the direction on that one because I'd have to check on the Japanese sales charts if it's still selling as well as it was, or if they think a new machine would really sell that game to anyone who missed it.
Well, that's exactly
the question.
You caught it right there
yeah,
at the end.
Yeah.
I think the sales data for those games so far is irrelevant because they're swinging for the fences with this thing. The 77% of the people who owned a PS4 hadn't played The Last of Us. Or the Uncharted games.
That's right. You brought that up. Yeah.
This was the kind of thing where it was like, well, let's give this thing a second chance. Not like it did bad to begin with because those games did great. Just like Splatoon did great, Mario Maker did great. I mean,
especially in Japan.
Yeah, those are successes absolutely for Nintendo. But if you're going to swing for the fences with a new console and get it to places where it's never been before, again, we've said this so many times in the show, you cannot keep selling Nintendo consoles to the diminishing group of hardcore Nintendo fans. We're getting old, we're getting tired, we're phasing out, we're dipping in and out of other mediums and other consoles and stuff like that. They need to bring in lapsed gamers, core gamers, people who multi-platform owners, everybody. And those are the kind of people who would love a really good shooter like Splatoon.
Yeah.
So give it to them for the first time, you know?
And Splatoon is made for those people.
Totally.
And Splatoon, just like Smash Brothers, right? Like Splatoon has that platform appeal where, there's certain games that come out, they have 10-hour campaigns. Let's take Star Fox, for example, right? If they release it on Wii U, comes out now, and then they do an export, the only reason to do that would be it didn't sell on Wii U, and so we're tapping into a new audience that is looking for games to play right now for their new device, right? But with Splatoon, it's like there are people who love this game who would keep on playing, but if they're gonna jump on NX, they kind of also want to switch. They don't want to have all these old machines hooked up, and I think some of that happened with the transition from 360 and Xbox One went all right, where the Halo community shrunk.
It got splintered,
right? You didn't get this. You didn't get this immediate kind of move towards that community moving to Xbox One. With games like Destiny, now you're seeing how Activision wants to keep that game alive and keep people playing and releasing updates, and I think Nintendo wants some of that too.
Yeah, and it gives them
makes total sense.
A great esports title as well, something that they can continue to trumpet as more and more people get hooked into it. All right, next one from Cartoon Skate, I want to say, on Twitter. All these were from Twitter, by the way. Thank you again for those who sent it in. Does Nintendo have a chance to slow the VR game with NX? So I kind of not crazy about the wording on this one because I wouldn't say slow the VR game, but instead kind of steal a bit of the microphone from VR. But I want to make it clear that I don't think VR is booming right now. I think there's a lot of interest and the tech is cool, but I think there are a lot of hurdles. I think there's still very few killer apps, reasons to run out and buy. And a lot of the games that I constantly see are very concept driven, but not the kind of game that it's like, oh, this is it. This is the one.
Well,
whereas there have been other platforms that the minute you see it, you
it's
got
not
it.
turnkey either, right? We are at the beginning of VR.
Yeah, we are.
said this here before. I think VR is awesome. I've played a bunch of games on it, and games like Valkyrie, that makes me feel like I'm sitting in a ship in Star Wars, and you cannot get this in any other video game experience. This is very special, but it's very fussy, and the barrier to entry is not just a ton of cash and having to upgrade your PC,
and it's also
but also
big.
it's
a big piece of
a
kit.
different kind of scary experience where all right, I'm not going to see what's going on around me. It's not something you can enjoy with your spouse on your couch next to you, and unless you want to buy two, and then it gets weird, and you're going to bonk into each other with the goggles. But the point on VR is the VR is
like
for
cone heads.
exactly. The beginning of VR is going
Demolition
to
Man.
be for tech heads with a lot of cash, or people who are so into PC gaming that they have the biggest, beefiest
Right.
machines. Then comes PlayStation VR, and I think things may be a little different. I think PlayStation VR will become more of a mass market device, and I think that's where NX and the VR and PlayStation can clash, because there are only so many dollars to go around for holiday shopping and for getting new technology in the house. And so it is going to become a game if both of those come out at the same time,
Yeah.
right? October is VR.
Yeah.
It's going to be a game. What sounds more exciting if you already have a PlayStation 4,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, but I think that I think VR is inherently cool. I think the immersion is great, and I think that if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, you don't know what you're missing. But I still think that regardless of the amount of dollars that have to go around, that Nintendo just needs to make sure they're saying the right things to get attention in general. And I feel like with Wii U out of the gate, there were a lot of questions that weren't answered the right way. And there were a lot of things along the way that it was just like, well, we're getting ports of games we already had from a third party perspective, which you can argue was a mistake. Now, whether it turns out to work out in their favor with NX by porting their own first party stuff instead to try and sell to a potentially larger base, we'll see. You know, I'm curious to see. Yeah, I'm curious to see how that works out. All right, this is going to be our last question. Not that one. Sorry, I'm looking for one. I'm looking for one I had in mind. Also not that one. Sorry, can't say who you are too, because that's so mean. Okay, here's our last NXE sort of question. This one comes from Josh Robinson on Twitter. Regardless of whether Nintendo consolidates console handheld effort into one with NX, it's still unlikely they can be successful. It's still unlikely they can be successful as the sole provider of games on their own platform. With that in mind, do you think they've learned their lesson regarding third parties? So I think consolidation would help them only because they're not splitting resources between two boxes. Instead, they're putting all of their efforts into one. So imagine now you have your Wii U and you have your 3DS, and there are times you put down your 3DS because there's nothing to play on it, and instead you end up on your Wii U for a while, and then you switch back because a bunch of RPGs just came out. For example, that is the case this year, right? You're going to see that effort concentrated towards one box. I think that's a good thing. And that also depends, too, if 3DS is out of the conversation, which I'm not convinced it is yet, even though it is long in the tooth.
Yeah.
The big question is, what is NX? Is NX meant to be the home first, handheld later?
Yep.
Is it the whole package, or is Nintendo going to stick around, sort of keeping 3DS alive a little longer and making sure that there are games for it? Because that's going to still split their resources, and they're splitting resources between mobile phones because they're still working on apps and services and theme park rides. Like, I almost wonder I worry they're doing too much.
Well, I think that's where they need help.
Yeah.
And help comes in the form of third parties. And you got to get on the phone to do that. But it's bigger than that. You need to have a console that has parity with the other ones, because nobody wants to develop something specifically for your console unless it's a Wii scenario where it's too big to ignore, right?
Yeah.
The Wii was so big that you had to make something for it, and you had third parties making stuff like, we got a Dead Space light gun game. Like, that's the kind of stuff that was like, all right, people had to think outside of the box to create something for this. It wasn't as simple as, and I know this is a very reductive way of game design, but it wasn't as simple as dragging and dropping to multiple consoles. It's not like when something comes out for Xbox One, PC, and PS4, the Wii U is not part of that conversation.
And there was excitement. Freaking Rockstar made a ping pong game, right? Like we said this before, and it's like there was excitement for the Wii to try something for this machine from companies that had kind of thought after GameCube we're not making games for Nintendo platforms anymore. And like when you rewind the clock a little bit, Nintendo used to be so strong that their games, their first-party games, were so good that everybody else was kind of worried to get in their way, right?
Yeah.
Like when a Zelda game came out, Mario game, all these games were so good, and all other developers aspire to it. Whereas like on the PlayStation and the Xbox, originally Sony, Microsoft did not have these powerful in-house games, and so the third parties, like it was the Splinter Cells that defined the Xbox, ignoring Halo. Now it's a level playing field again. You have Sony with incredibly strong first-party software. You have Microsoft, kind of taking
Both companies are
ownership of
trying
a lot
things,
of third-party titles to make Xbox exclusive. And so I do think Nintendo has to play a little bit more in that realm as well and leverage the third parties more.
Video game.
Well, what I was going to say is just that third-party brands have also gotten so big.
Yeah.
You have GTA, which is one of the biggest moneymakers in video games today. You have Call of Duty,
Fallout.
same thing. Fallout, same thing. Star Wars Battlefront, same thing. And these are brands that at the end of the day, if people are able to get great, like top-notch ports on your box as much as they will on with your first-party stuff, like it's a win-win. Like that is a deciding factor for people, you know?
I mean, the Minecraft conversation didn't start happening on a Nintendo platform until what, this year, last year, like 6 months ago. Like
December.
It's ridiculous. I mean, that's a just Titanic-sized ship that just went by. Games need to run well on Nintendo consoles the same way they run across everything else. Games need to sell well on Nintendo consoles the same way they do everywhere else. And that means that Nintendo fans need to be open to purchasing stuff outside of Nintendo core games. Video games are developed by people who grew up loving Nintendo. That anybody around our age right now, or a few years younger, a few years older, who's developing a video game had a Nintendo console growing up and would probably love nothing more than to develop for a Nintendo console again. But that has to be a financial decision that makes sense, and it has to be something that doesn't impede on their vision to the point that they have to start hacking parts off of their game to make it run on a Nintendo console.
Yeah, one thing I just want to throw in is that just to directly answer his question, though, have they learned their lesson regarding third parties? I think every leak I've seen so far has been related to a third-party conversation in terms of chip strength, power, etc., which means they're talking to people. Yeah, but that to me says they're talking to people. Like this is not that third parties are going to be surprised. Third parties presumably right now at least know a spec for this machine. If only that. Maybe they don't have a controller. I would imagine they don't, because Nintendo needs to keep that under wraps as tightly as possible. For them, instead, it's got to be, will your game run on this? Yes or no, and that's the conversation for right now, is what I perceive this to be.
Yeah, no, it's kind of tough to call, right? Like, again, we don't know what the NX is going to be. Like, if the NX is something where every developer goes, wow, that's so cool, I want to make something for this device just because I want to play around with its features, right? Then you start off on a completely different story. Let's go back to GameCube. It was a very, very similar device to the PlayStation and the Xbox, but it had proprietary media. Yeah. You couldn't fit all the data on there, but you couldn't play online, but you couldn't chat. Like it had all these, all these little asterisks, and you know, and it had a handle. Yeah. But and I love that machine dearly, but that was not something where developers would get excited and think, oh, I can do something, can make something for this device. So I like it when Nintendo is different and when Nintendo does something new. The Wii almost got it right, but it was really archaic hardware. Yeah, it had no network structure, right? Like it was just so behind the times that it wasn't
2 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah, it wasn't that exciting. Look at VR. Every freaking developer, every major publisher is making a VR game, even though you know the install base is going to be tiny. It's hard to get like customers. Everyone I speak to has a VR game. All the big guns, all your EAs, UBs, like everyone's got something.
But the big ballers,
and even the indies are making stuff,
like the Take-Two stuff. All right, so we've gotta continue and come back to this question, but we've got to go right now because
the esports live show is on.
The esports
Sirius,
live show is on.
Radio.
Yeah, you should check that out. Sirius Radio if you're into esports. Kevin Naki, great host. Lastly, you can support us by downloading the IGN app, which you can get on iOS, on PS4, on Android, on Xbox One, on Apple TV. My favorite one was on Apple TV. You should check those out. Great way to consume content with the site. Lastly, you can leave us feedback by going to iTunes or by emailing the show, mvc@ign.com. Lastly, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Brian Altano at
Agent Bizzle.
You can find Per Snyder at
PerIGN.
And you can find myself, Jose_Otero. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with more Nintendo Voice Chat.
Get the thing.